The moment Frank Sinatra walked into the Sands Hotel and Casino on December 15th, 1952, Las Vegas stopped being a mob playground and started becoming something else entirely. Not a gambling town, not a resort destination, but a king. And for nearly 20 years, Frank Sinatra was its king. This is the story of how a skinny Italian kid from Hoboken turned the Las Vegas Strip into his personal empire, how he made careers with a phone call and destroyed them with a silence, and how the most powerful voice in American music became the most dangerous man in Nevada. The fall before Vegas. To understand how Frank Sinatra conquered Las Vegas, you have to understand what he was running from. Because in 1952, when he first stepped onto that Copa Room stage at the Sands, Frank Sinatra was not a legend. He was finished. 5 years earlier, in 1947, Sinatra had been the biggest star in America. Teenage girls fainted at his concerts. His records sold millions. Hollywood paid him $150,000 per picture. He had everything. And then, almost overnight, he lost it all. Columbia Records dropped him in 1952. They had been his label since 1943, and they just let him walk. No goodbye, no thank you for the millions you made us. Just a quiet exit and a closed door. His movie career had already collapsed. The studios were not calling anymore. The scripts that came his way were garbage, supporting roles in forgettable pictures that barely got released. His voice was shot. He literally hemorrhaged his vocal cords during a performance in 1950. Doctors told him to rest. Sinatra did not know how to rest. He kept singing, kept pushing, and the voice that had made him famous started cracking, faltering, betraying him. And then there was Ava Gardner. Frank had left his wife Nancy for her, destroyed his family, burned his reputation, all for this tempestuous, impossible woman who drove him crazy with jealousy and rage. Their marriage was a war zone, public fights, private violence, a relationship so toxic that friends begged them both to walk away. By 1952, Frank Sinatra was broke, desperate, and forgotten. The teenage girls who had screamed for him had grown up. The industry that had worshipped him had moved on. He was 37 years old and his career was over. That's when Jack Entrada made him an offer. Entrada ran the Copa Room at the Sands Hotel and Casino, and he had known Frank from the old days when Entrada managed the Copacabana in New York. He offered Frank a 2-week engagement. $4,000. It was not much. It was insulting, actually, compared to what Sinatra used to command. But it was a lifeline. And Sinatra took it because Vegas did not care if Columbia Records had dropped you. Vegas did not care if your voice was damaged or your marriage was falling apart or your career was dead. Vegas cared about one thing: could you fill seats? Frank Sinatra could still fill seats. The Sands and the Resurrection. December 15th, 1952, opening night at the Copa Room. The Sands Hotel was barely 2 years old. It had opened in December of 1952 by a consortium of investors that included some very interesting names. Doc Stasher, a mob associate tied to Meyer Lansky's organization, Jake Friedman, a Texas gambler with his own shadowy connections, and the Fischetti brothers, Chicago outfit members who had been friends with Frank since his early nightclub days. The Copa Room was not the biggest showroom in Vegas. It held maybe 400 people, but it was intimate, elegant, sophisticated. Entrada had modeled it after his old New York club. He wanted the Copa Room to feel like the best supper club in Manhattan, but with slot machines next door. Sinatra walked out on stage that first night, and something changed. Maybe it was the smaller room. Maybe it was the Vegas audience, gamblers and wise guys and showgirls who did not judge, who did not care about your past, only your present. Maybe it was just that Sinatra finally had nothing left to lose, so he sang like a man with nothing left to lose. The voice was still damaged. You could hear it in certain notes, the strain, the roughness. But that damage added something, a vulnerability, pain. Sinatra had always been technically brilliant, but now he sounded human. He sounded like he had lived every word he was singing. The 2 weeks became 4, then 6. The crowds grew, word spread that Sinatra was back, that something special was happening at the Sands. And then, in March of 1953, Frank got the call that would change everything. From here to eternity, a small supporting role as Private Angelo Maggio in a war picture directed by Fred Zinnemann. Columbia Pictures did not want Frank. Director Fred Zinnemann did not want Frank. But Ava Gardner campaigned for him, begged Harry Cohn at Columbia to give Frank the part. They paid him $8,000. Frank's agents told him not to take it. It was beneath him. He was a leading man, not a supporting player. Frank took it anyway. He flew to Hawaii for filming. He gave the performance of his life. And on March 25, 1954, at the 26th Academy Awards, Frank Sinatra won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Just like that, he was back. Capitol Records signed him. Hollywood wanted him again. The voice was healing, stronger now, deeper, richer than before. And through it all, through the comeback, through the resurrection, Frank kept coming back to the sands. Because something had happened between Frank Sinatra and Las Vegas. Something deeper than business, something closer to love. In 1954, Sinatra became a part owner of the Sands Hotel and Casino. He bought a 9% stake for $54,000. It was not about the investment, it was about belonging. It was about having a home base, a place where Frank Sinatra did not just perform, he owned. The mob connections did not bother him. Hell, they never had. Frank had grown up around wise guys in Hoboken. His mother Dolly had political connections to the Democratic machine, which meant connections to the people who ran the streets. Frank understood the mob the way he understood show business. It was just another system, another set of rules, another game where knowing the right people opened doors. Doc Stasher and Meyer Lansky had hidden interests in the Sands. The Fischetti brothers were regulars. Sam Giancana, the Chicago outfit boss, became a close friend. These were not strangers to Frank. These were his people, and he never apologized for it. The Sands became Frank's kingdom, and the Copa Room became his throne. The Rat Pack era, power in numbers. But Frank Sinatra wasn't satisfied with solo power. He wanted to build something bigger. He wanted to create a moment that would define Las Vegas forever. Enter the Rat Pack. The name came from a joke. Lauren Bacall had called Frank and his friends a pack of rats after a wild night in Las Vegas in the mid-50s. It stuck. The group that would become legendary was assembled in 1959 and 1960. Dean Martin, the cool, effortless crooner who could sing and act and make it all look like he didn't care. He was Frank's perfect counterbalance. Where Frank was intense, driven, volcanic, Dean was smooth, laid-back, whiskey-voiced charm personified. Sammy Davis Jr., the most talented performer of the group, maybe the most talented performer alive. He could sing, dance, do impressions, play instruments, act, everything. But Sammy was also black, and in 1960 that meant something very different in America. Frank loved Sammy, defended him, and made him part of the group when others would have left him out. The dynamic was complicated. Sammy idolized Frank, called him the Pope, and that worship sometimes looked like something sadder. Peter Lawford, the British actor who had married into the Kennedy family, which made him Frank's connection to Camelot. Lawford wasn't the talent, he was the political access, the bridge to power beyond Vegas. Joey Bishop, the comedian, the writer, the guy who kept the show moving when Frank and Dean were too drunk to remember what they'd planned. Together, they were unstoppable. They called it the Summit. A 2-week engagement at the Sands Copa Room from January 26 to February 12, 1960. 2 shows a night. Frank, Dean, Sammy, Peter, and Joey on stage together, drinking, smoking, riffing, insulting each other, creating chaos that somehow became the greatest live entertainment Vegas had ever seen. There was no script. That was the genius of it. They'd come out, pour drinks, light cigarettes, and just talk. Sing a song, tell a joke, interrupt each other, bring showgirls on stage, mock the audience, mock themselves. It was intimate and unrepeatable. Every show was different. Every show was magic. They were filming Ocean's 11 during the day. George Clayton Johnson's script about a crew of World War II veterans robbing 5 Las Vegas casinos in one night. At night, they performed at the Sands. Sleep was optional. Drinking was mandatory. Chaos was guaranteed. The shows became legendary not because they were polished, but because they were real. This was 5 guys at the peak of their powers, fame and arrogance, refusing to care what anyone thought. They owned Vegas. They were Vegas. Frank was the leader, the chairman of the board, the one who made the decisions. If Frank didn't show up, there was no show. If Frank walked off stage, it was over. His power was absolute. Dean was the co-star, the only one who could stand next to Frank as an equal. Dino didn't need Frank the way Sammy did. Dino had his own career, his own money, his own life. That made him valuable. That made him Frank's real friend. Sammy was the talent, but also the tragic figure. The group made jokes on stage about Sammy being black. Some of them were affectionate, some of them were ugly. Sammy laughed along, always laughed along. Because what choice did he have? Frank Sinatra had made him part of the most powerful entertainment act in the world. You didn't question Frank, you didn't push back. Peter was the connection, and Joey was the glue. And in the middle of it all, January 20th, 1961, Peter Lawford's brother-in-law, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, was inaugurated as President of the United States. Frank Sinatra had campaigned for him. He raised money. He used his mob connections to deliver Union votes and Chicago precincts. JFK OWE'd Frank, and Frank wanted to collect. The Kennedy betrayal and the mobby problem. Frank Sinatra believed in loyalty. You were either with him or against him. You stood by your friends no matter what. And Frank thought John Kennedy was his friend. He had done everything for JFK. He organized the inaugural gala, a star-studded event that raised money and gave Kennedy's presidency a Hollywood sheen. Frank brought in Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole, Ethel Merman, Harry Belafonte, and Laurence Olivier. He produced it, directed it, and hosted it. He made Kennedy look like the coolest president in history. Frank owned the Cal Neva Lodge on the north shore of Lake Tahoe. He bought it in 1960. It was a beautiful property that straddled the California-Nevada border. You could stand in the casino with 1 foot in California, 1 in Nevada. Frank loved the symbolism. He built a compound at his Palm Springs estate specifically for Kennedy. A helicopter pad, extra phone lines, Secret Service accommodations. He spent hundreds of thousands of dollars making it perfect. Because JFK was going to stay there, Kennedy had promised. But Frank had another partner at Cal Neva, Sam Giancana, Chicago outfit boss, one of the most powerful mobsters in America. Giancana was not supposed to be involved. His name was not on any paperwork. But everyone knew. Sam was there all the time, entertaining in the celebrity room and hanging around the casino floor. And that became a problem. Bobby Kennedy, the president's younger brother and attorney general, was waging a war on organized crime. The Kennedys had used the mob to get elected. Let us be clear about that. Chicago delivered Illinois for JFK in 1960, and the outfit delivered Chicago. But once Kennedy was in the White House, Bobby decided the mob was the enemy. Bobby had files on Frank, files on Cal Neva, files on Giancana. In March 1962, Bobby advised his brother to cut ties with Sinatra completely. Too risky, too much exposure, the press was asking questions, the FBI was watching. So JFK went to Palm Springs in March 1962, and he did not stay at Frank's compound. He stayed at Bing Crosby's place instead. Bing Crosby was Frank's rival, a Republican who had not done a damn thing to help Kennedy get elected. When Frank got the call from Peter Lawford explaining that the president would not be coming to his home, Frank exploded. He tore apart the compound. He took a sledgehammer to the concrete helicopter pad. He ripped out the phone lines. He destroyed everything he had built for Kennedy. Peter Lawford, the messenger, was exiled from the Rat Pack. Frank never spoke to him again. He cut him out of movies, out of Vegas, out of his life. You do not betray Frank Sinatra and survive. But the damage was done. The Kennedy rejection stung in a way that nothing else had. Frank had thought he was powerful enough to bridge two worlds, the mob and the White House, the Strip and Pennsylvania Avenue. He had thought loyalty went both ways. He was wrong. And then came the final humiliation. In 1963, the Nevada Gaming Control Board revoked Frank's gaming license at Cal Neva. Sam Giancana had been staying there. Phyllis McGuire, one of the McGuire sisters and Giancana's girlfriend, had been performing. The gaming board said Frank had allowed a known criminal to stay at a licensed gaming establishment. Frank fought it. He hired lawyers. He threatened. He raged. Nothing worked. On October 10th, 1963, Frank Sinatra surrendered his gaming licenses in Nevada. He divested from Cal Neva. He gave up his stake in the Sands. For the first time since 1954, Frank Sinatra did not own a piece of Las Vegas. And it destroyed something in him. Not his career, not his power, but his belief that he was untouchable. The war with Howard Hughes. Frank still performed at the Sands. He still packed the Copa room. He still lived in his villa on the property like a king. But he didn't own it anymore. And that mattered. In 1966, a new buyer emerged. Howard Hughes, the billionaire recluse who'd been living in isolation at the Desert Inn, decided he wanted to own Las Vegas. He started buying casinos the way other people bought stocks. On July 14, 1967, Hughes bought the Sands Hotel and Casino for $14.6 million. Jack Entrata stayed on as manager. But Hughes sent in his own people, lawyers and accountants, men in suits who didn't understand show business and didn't care about Frank Sinatra's feelings. Frank had a credit line at the Sands, a marker system that let him gamble, lose, and settle up later. It was standard practice for entertainers who brought in millions. The house covered you because you were making them money. Hughes' accountants looked at Frank's markers and saw liabilities. They wanted him to pay. Now. Frank refused. This was his casino, his home. He'd built the Sands into what it was. And some billionaire recluse who'd never even walked the casino floor was going to tell him how much credit he could have. The confrontation came in September 1967. Details vary depending on who tells the story. Some say Frank drove a golf cart through a plate glass window. Some say he pulled a gun on a casino executive. Some say he climbed on a blackjack table and started kicking chips and cards everywhere. What's confirmed is this. Frank got into a violent confrontation with Carl Cohen, the Sands casino manager. Cohen had been there since the beginning. He'd tolerated Frank's temper, his demands, his arrogance for years. But on this night, Cohen had enough. Frank allegedly grabbed Cohen and started choking him. Cohen, a big man who didn't scare easily, punched Frank Sinatra in the mouth. He knocked out his front teeth, 2 of them, right there in the casino. It was over. Frank Sinatra's reign at the Sands ended with blood on the carpet and a dentist appointment. He left the property that night and never came back. But here's the thing about Frank Sinatra. You could knock out his teeth, but you could not knock out his power. Within weeks, Frank signed a deal with Caesar's Palace, a 3-year contract worth $3 million. They gave him everything the Sands would not: unlimited credit, his own villa, total control over his shows, a Learjet on standby, and respect. Most importantly, respect. Caesar's Palace had opened in 1966, a Roman-themed mega resort that made the Sands look small. Jay Sarno, the visionary behind it, understood that the future of Vegas was not mob-run joints with hidden interests. It was corporate behemoths with legal money and expensive marketing. But Sarno also understood that Frank Sinatra was Vegas. That having Frank at Caesars meant legitimacy, prestige, and power. Frank's shows at Caesars were spectacular. The Circus Maximus showroom held over 1,000 people. Bigger stage, bigger production, bigger paycheck. But it was still Frank's voice, Frank's presence, Frank's rules. And Frank's rules were simple. You did not tell him when to start. You did not tell him what to sing. You did not cut off his credit. You did not disrespect him or anyone he loved. And if you did, you were done. Not just with Frank, but with Vegas. Those were the rules. There is a story, maybe true, maybe exaggerated, about how Frank treated promoters. Jerry Weintraub, who managed Elvis and later became a legendary Hollywood producer, wanted to book Frank for a tour. He called Frank's people, got a meeting, and flew to Vegas. Frank made him wait, hours, then days. Jerry kept coming back, kept waiting, kept proving he was serious. Finally, Frank sat down with him. Frank said to him, "You want to book me for a tour? Fine. Here is the deal. You do not tell me where to play, I tell you. You do not tell me when to start, I tell you. You do not negotiate money, you pay what I say. And if I do not like you, the deal is off." You understand? Jerry understood, and Frank made him millions. That was Frank's power at Caesars. Total control. not just over his career, but over Vegas itself. If Frank said a young singer was good, that singer got booked. If Frank said a comedian was not funny, that comedian did not work on the strip. If Frank liked you, doors opened. If he did not, you were finished. His closest friend during these years was Jilly Rizzo, a New York restaurateur who ran Jilly's on West 52nd Street. Jilly followed Frank everywhere. Bodyguard, drinking buddy, enforcer. Jilly made problems disappear. If Frank wanted someone intimidated, Jilly handled it. If Frank wanted information, Jilly got it. Jilly was everywhere. The mob connections never went away. They could not. Too many years, too many friendships, too much history. Sam Giancana was murdered in 1975, shot in the basement of his Chicago home. Some said it was the outfit cleaning up loose ends before congressional hearings. Some said it was the CIA. Frank never talked about it publicly, but people close to him said he cried when he heard the news. Frank Sinatra owned Las Vegas through the 70s. Not literally, he did not hold gaming licenses anymore, but in every way that mattered, Vegas was his. The Strip existed because Frank gave it credibility. Entertainers came to Vegas because Frank had proven you could be a legend there. Caesar's Palace paid him millions because Frank Sinatra in the showroom meant sold-out crowds and high rollers at the tables. He could still fill every seat. He could still make 20-year-olds swoon and 60-year-olds weep. The voice had changed again, deeper now, rougher, the damage from the 50s adding texture and authority. He did not hit the high notes anymore. He did not need to. He was Frank Sinatra. The voice was just a tool. The power was in the presence. On March 23, 1971, Frank Sinatra announced his retirement. He was 55 years old. He had been performing for over 30 years. He was tired. His mother Dolly was pressuring him to quit, to enjoy life, to stop killing himself on stage. The retirement lasted 2 years. By 1973, Frank was back. A television special, a new album, a return to Caesar's Palace. He said he missed it. The truth was probably simpler. Frank Sinatra did not know how to not perform. The stage was the only place he felt alive. The comeback shows were good, sometimes great. But the voice was aging. The stamina was not there. Frank started forgetting lyrics, something that had never happened before. He would stare at the audience mid-song, lost, until the band covered for him or he laughed it off and moved on. But the crowds did not care. They were there for the legend, not the performance. They were there to say they had seen Frank Sinatra. That mattered more than any missed note or forgotten verse. Through the 80s and 90s, Frank kept touring, kept performing at Caesars, and later at the Golden Nugget and various other venues. The Ultimate Event Tour with Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. in 1988 was a final reunion of the Rat Pack that felt more like a wake than a celebration. Dean dropped out halfway through. Sammy was dying of throat cancer. Frank was the last one standing. Sammy died on May 16, 1990. Dean died on Christmas Day, 1995. Frank performed his last full concert on February 25, 1995 at the Palm Desert Marriott Ballroom. He was 79 years old. He died on May 14, 1998 of a heart attack at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was 82 years old. He was surrounded by family, Barbara, his fourth wife, and his children Nancy, Frank Jr., and Tina. The world mourned. But Vegas mourned differently. Vegas knew what Frank Sinatra had done for it, what he had meant to it, how he had taken a gambling town and turned it into an empire, how he had made Las Vegas synonymous with entertainment, sophistication, danger, and dreams. What Sinatra left behind. Frank Sinatra did not invent Las Vegas. Bugsy Siegel, Meyer Lansky, the Chicago outfit, they built the casinos. But Sinatra gave Vegas something those men never could. He gave it legitimacy. He gave it cool. Before Frank, Vegas was where you went to gamble. After Frank, Vegas was where you went to see the greatest entertainers in the world, to be part of something glamorous and dangerous, to feel like you were inside the VIP room, even if you were sitting in the cheap seats. Every entertainer who followed owes something to Sinatra. Elvis played Vegas because Frank proved it could be done without sacrificing dignity. Celine Dion has a residency at Caesars because Frank showed that Vegas could be home, not just a stop on a tour. Every modern Vegas production, every residency deal, every megastar appearance traces back to the template Frank created. But his legacy is complicated. Frank Sinatra was connected to the mob his entire life. He never apologized for it, never distanced himself, never pretended those friendships did not exist. He performed for them, socialized with them, helped them, and in return, they protected him. Was he complicit? Absolutely. Did he profit from their violence and corruption? Of course. But Vegas in the 50s and 60s was mob-controlled. There was no other way to operate, and Frank played the game better than anyone. His power came from talent, yes. That voice, those phrasing choices, that emotional intelligence that turned a song into a confession. But it also came from fear. People were afraid of Frank Sinatra, afraid of his temper, his connections, his ability to destroy careers. And Frank used that fear. He built a throne in Las Vegas, and he sat on it for 20 years. Nobody else could. Not Dean, not Elvis, not even Howard Hughes with all his money. The Strip belonged to Frank Sinatra, and everyone who walked through a casino in Vegas during those years knew it. The buildings are different now. The Sands was imploded on November 26, 1996. The Venetian sits where Frank once owned the stage. Caesar's Palace is still there, renovated and expanded beyond recognition. The Copa Room is gone. The Circus Maximus showroom has been redesigned multiple times. But Frank's presence remains. In the way Vegas sells itself, in the swagger of every headliner who thinks they own the room, in the belief that talent and connections and pure force of will can make you king. Frank Sinatra proved it could be done. He took a broken voice, a ruined career, a mob playground in the desert, and turned it into an empire. His empire. He made Vegas sing, and Vegas never forgot the voice that did it. That was the story of Frank Sinatra, how one singer became the most powerful man in Vegas. The chairman of the board, the voice, the king. Did you ever see him perform? Do you remember when Vegas was his and his alone? Tell me in the comments. And if you love discovering the real power behind the neon, hit subscribe because every legend has a story and Vegas never forgets.